300 guests watched Emily Thompson walk down the aisle in her white dress. 2 hours later, she was gone. What her husband discovered when he finally found her would shatter everything he thought he knew about the woman he married. This is the true story of the bride who vanished, and the devastating secret she left behind. It started the way most love stories do, quietly and unexpectedly. Michael Hayes was 32 years old when he met Emily at a coffee shop in downtown Chicago. She was sitting alone by the window, reading a book about architecture, which happened to be Michael's field. He worked as a project manager for a commercial construction firm, spending his days turning blueprints into buildings that would stand for generations. Michael had been single for 3 years after a relationship that ended badly. His ex-fiancée had cheated on him with his business partner, and the betrayal left him cautious about opening his heart again. His mother worried about him constantly, calling every Sunday to ask if he'd met anyone special. His answer was always the same: he wasn't looking. But Emily changed that. When Michael asked if the seat across from her was taken, she looked up with these warm brown eyes and smiled in a way that made his chest feel lighter. They talked for 2 hours that day. She told him she worked as a freelance graphic designer, that she'd moved to Chicago 6 months ago from somewhere out west, and that she loved old buildings just like he did. When he left that coffee shop, Michael had her phone number and a feeling he hadn't experienced in years: hope. Their first date was at an Italian restaurant in Little Italy. Emily wore a blue dress and laughed at his terrible jokes. She asked thoughtful questions about his work and seemed genuinely interested in his dreams of one day starting his own firm. She told him about her childhood growing up in small towns, moving around a lot because her father was in the military. She said her parents had passed away in a car accident 5 years ago, and she had no siblings. Michael's heart ached for her. He understood loneliness. The relationship moved at a comfortable pace. They saw each other twice a week at first, then 3 times, then almost every day. Emily fit into his life seamlessly. She got along with his friends, charmed his mother during Sunday dinners, and never complained when he had to work late on project deadlines. She was patient, understanding, and affectionate in all the right ways. 6 months in, Michael realized he was in love with her. 8 months in, he started looking at engagement rings. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button, like and share so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Michael proposed on their 1-year anniversary at the same coffee shop where they'd met. He'd arranged with the owner to close early and set up candles throughout the space. When Emily walked in and saw what he'd done, tears filled her eyes. She said yes before he even finished asking the question. His mother cried happy tears when he told her. His best friend, David, clapped him on the back and said he'd finally found a good one. Everything felt right in Michael's world. He'd found his person, the one who would stand beside him through everything life threw at them. Or so he thought. The wedding was planned for September, giving them 8 months to prepare. Emily wanted something simple and elegant, which suited Michael perfectly. They chose a venue an hour outside the city, a restored barn with exposed beams and string lights that looked like something out of a magazine. Emily handled most of the planning since she had more flexible hours, and Michael trusted her completely. She showed him color swatches and flower options, and he agreed to everything because seeing her excited made him happy. But there were small things, little moments that Michael would replay later with a different understanding. Emily rarely talked about her past in specific terms. When he asked about her childhood friends or wanted to visit her hometown, she'd change the subject smoothly, steering the conversation elsewhere. She didn't have social media, which she said was because she valued privacy and found those platforms toxic. Her phone was always face down, and she'd get a strange look on her face when it buzzed with notifications. Once, Michael picked it up to hand it to her, and she practically lunged across the room to grab it from him. She'd laughed it off, saying she was paranoid about people reading her client messages, but the intensity in her eyes had surprised him. Michael mentioned these things to David once over beers. David said all women were a little mysterious, that it was part of their charm, and Michael should just be grateful he'd found someone who made him happy. so Michael pushed the doubts aside. He was probably just nervous about the wedding, about making such a huge commitment. That was normal, wasn't it? September 21st arrived with clear blue skies and perfect autumn weather. Michael woke up in his apartment feeling nervous and excited in equal measure. By tonight, Emily would be his wife. They'd start there forever. He got dressed in his tuxedo with David's help, his hands shaking slightly as he fixed his tie. David made jokes to calm him down, but Michael could barely focus on anything except the fact that in a few hours, everything would change. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 p.m. Michael arrived at the venue early and stood at the altar, watching guests file in and take their seats. He saw his mother in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue even though nothing had happened yet. He saw colleagues from work, friends from college, neighbors, and distant relatives who'd traveled from out of state. The barn was decorated exactly as Emily had planned, with white flowers everywhere and candles that would be lit as the sun set. Then the music started, and everyone stood. Michael's heart hammered in his chest as he looked toward the entrance. And there she was. Emily walked down the aisle alone, since she had no family to give her away, and she looked absolutely stunning in her dress. Michael felt his eyes burn with emotion. This was real. This was happening. When she reached him and took his hands, her fingers were cold despite the warm day. He squeezed them gently, trying to transfer some of his warmth to her. The officiant began the ceremony. Michael barely heard the words. He was focused entirely on Emily's face, on the way she was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Was it love? Sadness? Fear? He told himself he was overthinking things. She was probably just emotional. This was a big moment for both of them. They exchanged vows, the traditional ones they'd chosen from the officiant's book. When it came time for the rings, Michael slid the gold band onto Emily's finger and felt a surge of joy so intense it nearly knocked him over. She was his wife now. They were married. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife, and Michael kissed Emily as everyone clapped and cheered. They walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, and for those few minutes, everything was perfect. Michael thought this was the happiest moment of his entire life. The reception started immediately after. The barn's main area had been transformed with tables, a dance floor, and a bar in the corner. Dinner was served family style, and Michael sat at the head table with Emily beside him, her hand resting on his leg under the table. They cut the cake together, fed each other bites while cameras flashed, and had their first dance to a song Emily had chosen. Michael held her close and whispered that he loved her. She smiled but didn't say it back, which he noticed but didn't mention. Around 7:30, the dancing was in full swing. Michael was talking with some guys from work near the bar when he realized he hadn't seen Emily in a while. He looked around the barn, scanning the crowd, but didn't spot her white dress anywhere. He asked one of her bridesmaids, a woman named Jessica who Emily said she'd met through work, if she'd seen the bride. Jessica shook her head, looking unconcerned. "She's probably in the bathroom," Jessica said. "You know how long that dress takes to deal with?" Michael waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. He started walking around the venue, checking the bathrooms, the bridal suite where Emily had gotten ready, the parking lot. Nothing. Her car was still there. Her purse was still on the head table. But Emily was gone. He asked more people if they'd seen her. No one had, not for at least half an hour. David joined him in searching, and Michael could see his friend's expression shift from amused to concerned. By 8:15, Michael was genuinely worried. He called Emily's phone and heard it ringing from inside her purse. She'd left it behind. Who leaves their phone behind? He checked with the venue staff, thinking maybe she'd gotten sick or needed air, but no one had seen her leave the barn. It was like she'd evaporated into thin air. Michael stood in the middle of the reception, surrounded by guests who were now watching him with confused and pitying looks, and felt panic rising in his throat. Where was his wife? Where was Emily? If you are still here, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, Click on the subscribe button, like and share so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Michael did what anyone would do. He called the police. The dispatcher told him that adults have the right to leave whenever they want, that there was no sign of foul play, and that he should wait 24 hours before filing a missing person report. Michael argued that his wife had disappeared from their wedding reception without her phone or purse, but the dispatcher's tone remained patient and unmoved. "People get cold feet," she said. "It happens more than you'd think. Give her some time." But Michael knew something was wrong. Emily wouldn't just leave. Not like this. Not without a word. He called her phone again and again from his own phone, leaving voicemail after voicemail begging her to call him back, to tell him she was okay, to explain what happened. The voicemails went unanswered. He texted her, forgetting she didn't have her phone, just needing to do something. The reception dissolved into chaos. Guests didn't know whether to leave or stay. His mother was crying, asking Michael if they'd fought about something. David was trying to keep everyone calm while also helping Michael search. The venue staff eventually told them they needed to close for the night. Michael stood in the empty parking lot at midnight, still in his tuxedo, and felt like he was living in a nightmare. He went home alone. The apartment he and Emily had been sharing for the past 3 months felt hollow and strange. Her things were everywhere. Her clothes in the closet, her toothbrush by the sink, her coffee mug in the dish drainer. Michael sat on the couch and didn't sleep at all that night. He just waited for the door to open, for Emily to walk in with an explanation that would make sense of everything. The next morning, David came over with coffee and bagels that Michael couldn't eat. They filed a missing person report at the police station, and a detective named Rodriguez took down all the information. Detective Rodriguez was in his 50s, with tired eyes that had seen too much. He asked Michael basic questions. How long had they known each other? Did Emily have any history of mental illness? Had there been any arguments or stress leading up to the wedding? Michael answered everything honestly, growing more frustrated with each question because none of it mattered. Emily was gone, and no one seemed to understand the urgency. Detective Rodriguez told Michael they'd look into it, but his tone suggested he'd seen this before and knew how it usually ended. Michael went home and started his own investigation. He logged into their shared laptop and went through Emily's files, looking for anything that might explain where she'd gone. Most of her folders were work-related, filled with design projects and client communications. But there was one folder buried deep in her documents, labeled simply, "Personal." Michael clicked it open. Inside were scanned images of documents. He clicked the first one and felt his stomach drop. It was a marriage certificate. Emily's name was on it, but so was another man's name, Robert Jennings. The date was from 3 years ago. Michael stared at the screen, his brain struggling to process what he was seeing. Emily had been married before? She'd never mentioned it. Why wouldn't she tell him something like that? He clicked through more files. There were divorce papers, dated 2 years ago, bank statements showing joint accounts that had been closed. And then there were emails, dozens of them, between Emily and someone named Claire. Michael started reading. The emails were casual at first, 2 friends catching up, but as he read further, the content became strange. Claire was asking Emily about the new project and whether this one would stick. Emily responded that Michael was perfect, that everything was going according to plan, and that she just needed to get through the wedding. Michael's hands were shaking so badly he could barely control the mouse. He kept reading, going back months in the email chain. There were references to money, to timing, to playing a role. In one email, Emily wrote, "I'm getting tired of this life, Claire. I want out. But I need one more big score, and Michael's it. After this, I'm done." Michael closed the laptop and ran to the bathroom, where he threw up until there was nothing left in his stomach. What was this? Who was Emily? Nothing made sense. Michael felt like the floor had disappeared beneath his feet. He called David, who came over immediately. Together, they went back through the emails, trying to piece together what was happening. The picture that emerged was one Michael didn't want to believe. Emily wasn't who she said she was. The email suggested she'd done this before, targeted men with money, married them, and then, what? Disappeared with their assets? Michael checked his bank accounts. The joint account he'd opened with Emily after the engagement was empty. She'd cleaned it out yesterday morning, before the wedding. $23,000, gone. His credit cards showed charges he didn't recognize, all from the past week. Cash advances, money transfers, purchases at stores he'd never been to. Emily had been preparing. She'd known exactly what she was going to do. David wanted to call Detective Rodriguez immediately, but Michael needed to understand more first. He went through everything in the apartment that belonged to Emily. In the back of her closet, hidden behind her winter coats, he found a locked metal box. Michael broke the lock with a hammer, his heart pounding. Inside were more documents, more evidence of a life he knew nothing about. There was a driver's license with Emily's photo, but a different name, Michelle Carter. Another license with the name Sarah Patterson. Credit cards under various names. And at the bottom of the box, a small notebook filled with handwritten entries. Michael opened the notebook and started reading. It was a journal of sorts, detailing Emily's life for the past 5 years. She wrote about the men she'd targeted, how she'd chosen them, what she'd taken from each one. Robert Jennings, the man from the marriage certificate, was mentioned frequently. Emily had married him, accessed his inheritance, and then filed for divorce when he started asking too many questions. She'd walked away with over $100,000 in the settlement. There were other names too. Daniel Morrison, Kevin Wu. Each entry described her method. Meet them in public places, build a connection, become exactly what they needed, marry them quickly, and then extract as much money as possible before disappearing. Michael's entry was dated from the day they met at the coffee shop. New target acquired, she'd written. Michael Hayes, 32, construction project manager. Recent bad breakup means he's vulnerable and eager for connection. No family except mother. This should be easy. Michael felt like he'd been punched in the chest. Every moment they'd shared, every conversation, every kiss, every time she'd told him she loved him, it was all a lie, a performance. Emily had studied him like a predator studies prey, identifying his weaknesses and exploiting them perfectly. The coffee shop meeting wasn't chance. She'd known he went there. She'd staged the whole thing. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button, like and share, so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Michael brought everything to Detective Rodriguez the next morning. The detective's expression shifted from skeptical to serious as he reviewed the documents and read through the emails and journal entries. This wasn't a case of cold feet or a runaway bride. This was fraud, identity theft, and possibly part of a larger criminal operation. Rodriguez called in other detectives, and suddenly Michael's apartment became a crime scene with officers photographing everything and bagging evidence. They ran Emily's fingerprints through the system and got a hit. Her real name was Emma Louise Cartwright, and she had a criminal record going back 12 years. Petty theft, credit card fraud, identity theft, and 2 arrests for marriage fraud that had resulted in probation instead of jail time. The photo from her last arrest looked exactly like the woman Michael had married, though her hair was different and she was going by yet another name. Detective Rodriguez told Michael that marriage fraud was more common than people realized. Con artists, mostly women but sometimes men, would target lonely or trusting people, rush into marriage, gain access to their finances, and then vanish. Some did it for years, moving from state to state, leaving broken hearts and empty bank accounts behind. Emma Cartwright was apparently very good at it. The police tracked Emma's movements through credit card transactions and security footage. She'd taken a cab from the wedding venue to a motel near the highway, where she'd changed clothes and checked out 30 minutes later. From there, she'd driven a car that had been parked there in advance, a detail that showed how carefully she'd planned everything. The last confirmed sighting was at a gas station near the Indiana border. After that, she'd vanished. Michael sat in Detective Rodriguez's office and tried to process everything. The woman he'd loved didn't exist. Emily Thompson was a character Emma had created, a role she'd played for 18 months while systematically stealing from him and preparing for her escape. How do you grieve someone who was never real? How do you move on from a relationship that was always a lie? His mother took it hard. She'd welcomed Emily into their family, treated her like the daughter she'd never had, and now she felt betrayed and foolish. Michael's friends didn't know what to say. Some tried to be supportive, but he could see the judgment in their eyes. How did you not know? How did you fall for this? Michael asked himself the same questions 1,000 times. Looking back, he could see the red flags he'd ignored. The vagueness about her past, the secrecy with her phone, the way she'd pushed for a quick wedding. But in the moment, blinded by love and loneliness, he'd seen only what he wanted to see. The police investigation expanded. They contacted the other men Emma had targeted, the ones mentioned in her journal. Robert Jennings was living in Arizona now, remarried, and trying to forget the worst mistake of his life. He told detectives that Emma had destroyed him financially and emotionally, and it had taken years to rebuild. Daniel Morrison was in Florida, working 2 jobs to pay off the debt Emma had left him with. Kevin Wu had moved to California and changed his name, wanting no connection to the past. None of them had reported her to the police because they'd been too embarrassed, too ashamed that they'd fallen for her lies. Michael understood that shame intimately now. It sat in his chest like a weight, making it hard to breathe. He'd cancelled the honeymoon, returned the wedding gifts, and sent apologetic messages to everyone who'd attended the reception. He had to explain over and over what happened, each retelling making him feel smaller and more foolish. The story spread through his social circles, and he could feel people's pity and curiosity every time he left the house. 3 weeks after the wedding, Detective Rodriguez called with news. They'd found Emma. She was in a small town in Nevada, living under another name, already working on her next target. Local police had arrested her at a coffee shop, where she'd been having lunch with a man who looked heartbreakingly similar to Michael. Mid-30s, professional, alone. The man had been confused and upset when officers took Emma away in handcuffs. He'd known her for 6 months as Nicole Bennett, and they were talking about moving in together. Emma was extradited back to Illinois to face charges. Michael had to identify her in a lineup, a surreal experience that felt like something from a TV show. She stood there behind the glass, wearing an orange jumpsuit, looking exactly like the woman he'd married, but also completely different. There was no warmth in her expression now, no carefully crafted smile or loving gaze. She looked bored and irritated, like she'd been inconvenienced. The trial took 4 months to prepare. Michael had to give a deposition, describing the entire relationship from beginning to end for the legal record. Emma's defense attorney tried to paint her as a victim of circumstance, someone who'd been driven to fraud by poverty and lack of opportunity. But the prosecution had a strong case. Multiple victims, documented fraud, a journal that proved premeditation, and Emma's own criminal history. The evidence was overwhelming. Michael attended every day of the trial. He needed to hear it all, to understand the full scope of what had been done to him and the others. Emma's real background came out during testimony. She'd grown up in foster care, bouncing between homes, and had learned early that people could be manipulated if you understood what they wanted. She'd started with small cons as a teenager, then graduated to romance fraud in her 20s after realizing how effective it was. She had no remorse. A psychologist who evaluated her testified that she showed traits consistent with antisocial personality disorder, an inability to form genuine emotional connections with others. When Emma took the stand, she was calm and composed. She admitted to everything but framed it as survival. "People with money have it easy," she said. "I was just evening things out." She looked directly at Michael once during her testimony and said, "You were lonely. I gave you what you wanted. If you got hurt, that's not my fault." Michael felt those words like a physical blow. Even now, even after everything, she didn't see what she'd done as wrong. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning with a verdict. Guilty on all counts. Emma was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. The judge noted that she'd shown no remorse and had spent over a decade destroying people's lives for profit. 8 years felt both too much and not enough to Michael. No amount of time would undo what she'd done, would return the money she'd stolen, or repair the trust she'd shattered. After the trial, Michael tried to rebuild his life. He changed banks, closed all accounts Emma had touched, and worked with a financial advisor to repair his credit. The joint account money was gone forever. The credit card debt took a year to pay off. His mother kept suggesting therapy, and eventually, Michael agreed to go. His therapist, Dr. Patricia Green, helped him understand that what happened wasn't his fault, that con artists are experts at manipulation and anyone can be a victim. But understanding something intellectually and feeling it emotionally were two different things. Michael struggled with trusting people. He went on a few dates, set up by well-meaning friends, but couldn't relax around any of them. He'd find himself analyzing everything they said, looking for inconsistencies, waiting for the lies to surface. It was exhausting. After 6 months, he stopped trying. Work became his focus. Michael threw himself into projects, staying late at the office, volunteering for assignments no one else wanted. His boss noticed and promoted him to senior project manager, which came with a raise and more responsibility. The work kept his mind busy, kept him from dwelling on the past. His colleagues knew what had happened, but were kind enough not to mention it. Michael appreciated that more than they knew. A year after the wedding, Michael got a letter from Emma. She'd written it from prison, and he almost threw it away without reading it. But curiosity won out. The letter was short, written in the same handwriting from the journal he'd found. "I've been thinking about you," it said. "Out of everyone, you were the nicest. I almost felt bad. Almost. You should know that what we had wasn't entirely fake. Some moments were real, but I'm not capable of loving anyone the way you wanted me to. I hope you find someone who is. You deserve that." Michael read the letter 3 times, trying to decode whether it was another manipulation or something resembling honesty. In the end, he decided it didn't matter. Emma's opinion, her feelings or lack of them, had no bearing on his life anymore. He burned the letter in his kitchen sink and washed the ashes down the drain. It felt symbolic somehow, a final letting go. Dr. Green asked him during one session what he'd learned from the experience. Michael thought about it for a long time before answering. "I learned that people aren't always who they say they are," he said. "But I also learned that I can survive more than I thought I could. A year ago, I thought my life was over, but I'm still here. I'm okay." Dr. Green smiled and told him that was significant progress. Around the 18-month mark, something shifted. Michael woke up one Saturday morning and realized he hadn't thought about Emma in 3 days. It seemed like a small thing, but it felt monumental. The grip she'd had on his thoughts was loosening. He started doing things he'd enjoyed before meeting her. Playing basketball with David on weekends. Taking his mother to Sunday brunch. Reading books that had nothing to do with relationships or betrayal. He also started volunteering at a community center, teaching basic construction skills to teenagers who were interested in the trades. The kids were funny and irreverent and kept him grounded. They didn't know about his past, didn't treat him with pity or curiosity. To them, he was just Mr. Hayes, the guy who taught them how to use power tools safely and told dad jokes while they worked. So what can we learn from Michael's story? How do you protect yourself from someone like Emma without becoming cynical and closed off to genuine connection? The truth is, there's no perfect formula. Con artists succeed because they're skilled at reading people and becoming exactly what their targets need. They study human psychology, exploit loneliness and desire, and create illusions so convincing that even smart, careful people fall for them. Michael wasn't foolish or naive. He was human, wanting love and connection like we all do. But there are warning signs worth noting. Extreme secrecy about the past. Reluctance to introduce you to family or long-term friends. Pushing for quick commitments without allowing time to truly know each other. Inconsistencies in their stories. isolation from your support network, accessing your finances early in the relationship. None of these things alone prove someone is a con artist, but together, they form a pattern worth paying attention to. The most important lesson from Michael's story isn't about identifying red flags, though. It's about resilience. It's about the fact that betrayal, no matter how devastating, doesn't have to be the end of your story. You can survive it. You can heal from it. You can learn to trust again without losing yourself in paranoia. Michael did it, and thousands of other survivors do it every year. If you've experienced something similar, if you've been lied to or manipulated or financially exploited by someone you trusted, please know that it wasn't your fault. You're not stupid or weak. You were targeted by someone who made deception their life's work. The shame belongs to them, not you. And recovery is possible, even when it feels impossible, in the darkness. Emma Cartwright's story ended alone in a prison cell, having spent her entire adult life taking from others, without ever experiencing genuine human connection. That's the real tragedy, perhaps. Not the money she stole or the heart she broke, but the fact that she never knew what real love felt like, never experienced the deep satisfaction of authentic relationship. She died as empty as she'd lived. But Michael's story? His story continues, filled with ordinary moments that are extraordinary precisely because they're real. Birthday parties and school plays and Sunday morning pancakes and arguments about whose turn it is to do dishes and quiet evenings on the couch and everything that makes up a life actually lived with people who truly know and love you. That's the victory. Not revenge, not vindication, not Emma's imprisonment or death, but the life Michael built after she tried to destroy him. That life, honest and imperfect and beautiful, is his testimony to the resilience of the human spirit. So if you're watching this and you've been hurt, betrayed, left wondering if you'll ever trust again, let Michael's story be proof that you will. Not immediately, not without work, but eventually. The hurt will fade, the lessons will remain, and someday, when you're least expecting it, someone real will come along. Someone who sees you and values you and chooses you every day, not because you're a target, but because you're you. And that will make everything you survived worth it. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Have you or someone you know experienced something similar? How did you heal? What would you want others to know? We read every comment and your stories matter. And if you found value in this video, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We share true stories like this every week. Stories about resilience, survival, and the strength of the human spirit. Because everyone has a story, and every story deserves to be heard. Until next time, remember, your past doesn't define your future. Your choices do. Choose healing. Choose hope. Choose to believe in love again. But do it wisely. Take care of yourselves out there. And remember, you're stronger than you think.